is going to address self-direction at the center of Medicaid managed care. And we have a variety of speakers who will be joining us, including Jessica Nell, who's a self-determination advocate, Merrill Friedman, Vice President of AmeriGroup, Mary Panzer, a former state legislator, Mitchell Hagopian, who's a supervising attorney of Disability Rights Wisconsin and a member of the IRIS Advisory Committee. We've asked each of them to speak for 7 minutes each. So, and the big evil timekeeper's to my right. And when she flashes an evil look at you, that is the 6-minute warning. You don't want to see the 7-minute warning because she really is frightening. So
we'll have to unleash Clyde.
Well, yes. So which one of you would like to go first?
Jessica, they like the order.
All right, Jessica, the mic is yours.
Just press the green button.
As soon as you press the green button.
Good afternoon.
Well, I can hear you, but that's not fair.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we're going to separate.
Okay. I'm delighted to be part of this panel this afternoon. Self-direction is near and dear to my heart. As a young individual who lives on my own in an apartment, without self-direction, I would be, I think, lost. Self-direction means so much to me. I think as a state with self-direction, I hail from Green Bay, having just rolled out with IRIS and family care. We're just getting out the kinks, I should say, of what that means. I just rolled out in July, so I think self-direction has taken on a new meaning to me as I can self-direct my own budget and money and do those kinds of things. But I think what self-direction really means to me is not having to reside in nursing homes as much. And what that means is I'm almost 28, and since the age of 20, I've been in and out of nursing homes due to lack of personal care resources. And I would tell you that as someone who is that young, nobody my age should have to reside in nursing homes. Nursing homes are designed for people who are, in my mind, ready for the end stages of life. And for somebody as young as that, my age, someone in their 20s should be just getting to know themselves, what they want to do with their lives, not facing people who are looking at the end stages of life. So for someone who's almost 28, I've seen things that most 28 years old shouldn't have to see and deal with. So when we look at that, and I look at the state of Wisconsin, I say to myself, what do we want for our people with disabilities and our older adults? Do we want them to have to look at being in nursing homes because we can't afford to keep them in their homes with caregivers? Or do we want to say, well, your only option is to go stay in that nursing home because we can't provide the care you need? I think it's a gross negligence almost, because when that happens, you're taking someone's quality of life away, you're taking away their freedoms, and you're taking away the right to say, this is what I want, and this is what I need and deserve. I think we have the ability as a state to come together, all of our different resources, and really create a exemplary system for what we want for our people with disabilities. I know myself, I run a business now. I just started my own business, speaking of employment. So what would I do if somebody said to me, well, Jessica, it's time to go to the nursing home, you have to have another surgery. What do I say to my clients? Well, sorry, I have to close my business for the next 3 months. I can't provide you with services. That's not the way I'd want to do things. I know many of you out there. I see a lot of familiar faces, and all of you know that's not how I would do things, and that's not how you would serve me. So let's look at the state of Wisconsin and treat our people the way we would want to be treated.
Fabulous in under 7 minutes, so thank you.
Okay.
Pressure's on.
Way to set that, yeah, way
I
to
don't
set
think
the bar.
Merrill will match that, much less a former legislator, but
Don't worry with us.
I am a former one, so I can.
I've had experience with Clyde and you over the years. I'm a little leery of my time.
Mary, if you begin with 9, you have that.
I know. So when Jessica was introduced to me, Lisa said she's a rock star, and no, I mean she just keeps raising the bar. So I'm just going to try to keep up and then learn from you. So thank you for your comments, Jessica, and again, thank you to the council for the opportunity. And they have a keen sense of continuing their mission and mobilizing communities to talk about managed care and the critical issues that are so important for people with disabilities. And I'm privileged to be asked to come back, even if I don't stick to my 7 minutes, but I am trying. So no more thank yous. I'm going straight into it. I think when I often speak for the council, it's around managed long-term services and supports issues. And because IRIS is so incredibly important, has been so incredibly meaningful to people, this panel really is just about self-direction and how it fits in within a managed care or long-term services and supports environment or structure. And so I guess I could say this for how it fits in. It is the program for people with disabilities. I don't think there's another way to do this. I think that if we are going to hold up Jessica's dreams and goals and what she's been living, no less holding up the ADA and the core tenets of the ADA, self-direction is a core part of how we do that. Managed care is often very scary. I don't think I need to point that out too many times. But it also can be the impetus for increasing access to self-direction if done right. And on that note, managed care is a tool. It has to be done right. We have to develop a good system for how to charge it and how to operate it, how to use it, where you use it, who uses it. So I think, when we're talking about managed care and we're talking about the value of self-direction, self-direction is probably the largest role around managed care. So there is no one model for managed care. I think that we've seen self-direction implemented in many states right now. There are multiple versions. Healthcare is local. People's ability to live independently is local. So I think, we heard from Brian earlier. We heard from CQL. People who are self-directing today will be self-directing through the next iteration. There are significant value points to self-direction. I say this all the time. CQL referenced it as well. People who pick and choose the services that are meaningful to them use fewer services and actually use the services that are in their service plan. So if we move away from some of the older paternalistic models of prescribing services to people that either go unused or are just irritating because people don't want them and they're not helpful, I think we recognize both those personal and economic savings that the state is really looking to achieve here. We talk a lot about stakeholder engagement. We've heard a lot about stakeholder engagement today, and I think there are a couple of things from a managed care perspective. One is there's never enough stakeholder engagement. A stakeholder, and you all brought it up earlier, stakeholder means individuals with disabilities, their families, whoever they want with them. It is providers. It's anybody who is invested. It's employment support people. Everybody should be engaged in the conversation about it. But I would say for people with disabilities themselves and others, whatever the state does around stakeholder engagement, also make sure that you're engaging with the health plans, because that's where that relationship is. And if you have that access and help create that access so that you are part of informing that system and informing that program design and really informing how they think, and doggone it, get a job with them. I say infiltrate, the managed care and the health plan system. That's how we're going to create the change. That's how people with disabilities are not at this proverbial table. They're designing the programs that should be benefiting people with disabilities, and that includes clearly self-direction. So I just think that the engagement piece has to be constant. It has to be extremely interactive. It doesn't mean, and I have my colleagues, in the back there that actually run our health plan here. It doesn't mean listening and just listening. It means really actionable outcomes. So taking the information and tracking those lessons that we learn from people who use the services. So I just think, actionable is going to be the key to whatever we move around. How am I doing on time? They're staring at me.
No, you got 2 minutes.
I got 2 minutes. So I think those takeaways, I say, the other thing to do is all of these contracts, we've heard a lot today about Tennessee, we've heard about Kansas, there are probably Texas, is one of the oldest long-term service and supports programs. But get online, look up the contracts. I'm not a big reader. Part of it is ADHD, part of it is I just don't enjoy it. But get online and read the contracts. Look at what states are doing around pay for performance and outcomes, so that you really get a feel on what states are setting up possibly as promising practices, possibly as things never to do again. But look at where some of that emphasis has been in other states, so you can actually help make really good suggestions here. So if you know that employment is an outcome, that's great. We can get in there and help design that here, and you're engaged in that. If it's, transitions from any type of setting, aside from your own home, and that's where, states are really putting the emphasis, get in there and help design that. So I think it's a good guide to get educated and share some of that information around. I'll stop my comments there.
Thank you. Mary?
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for coming today to listen to what we have to tell you from Wisconsin and to hear from participants especially. I have kind of a unique background in that I actually sat at this table on finance and then went to leadership as majority leader when we were designing these programs. And it isn't oftentimes that you get the gift as a former reform legislator to actually see how things are working. And in my next part of my life, I actually had that opportunity. First, working with the ICA, who got the contract, started at TMG from the start, and they had the depth and the expertise to understand how you did the build out on this very successfully, I would say. And secondly, working with the advocacy groups. I was blessed early on in my legislative career. I had a local group in Washington County that was an advocacy group for people with disabilities. And I was young at the time, including young at heart, but I believe that people should not have a fear of their government, that they should be part of it. And so when I heard, would you come speak, and I did on a regular basis, I thought that was really great, that you should include everybody in your community in terms of how you could make government better. And as a legislator, there's nothing better than to listen. And I would just say, for those of you here today, and especially Jessica for coming down, we really do appreciate it, because your face makes a difference, and you oftentimes don't know that. I know I see Lynn Breloff out there. I still come back on occasion. I think it's springtime, usually we're here to kind of work through with groups of participants and their families, oftentimes, how you can advocate, and that's really important to do. In terms of self-direction, though, I have to tell you, it was a program that fit well, and really almost it happened before the policy happened, because we tend to be an independent lot here in Wisconsin, which you know, and we're a small business state. And what does that mean? We know our communities. We know each other a little bit more maybe than others do, and it really made a difference for participants and their families and their communities to have a program where you could make it work for you. And I had the opportunity to go through and work with policymakers as well as participants, legislators, IRIS consultants, to kind of really look around like a kitchen table, dig deeply and hear what was working, what wasn't. And I always said it, I was just a facilitator, but my job was to figure out what could be improved as well as what was working well. And out of that, I'd just like to tell a couple stories to give you the kind of feel and then walk away. Because we affect three different populations. Young people, the other end, the bookends of which myself are getting closer to, And then there's all kinds of people in between that have individual circumstances in their life that you could never guess when you woke up one day that you might have to live with and have to account for. First story is a young man in Mequon, graduated from high school. Through his IC, as IRIS consultant, he was able to try different jobs and self-employment. He wanted to be kind of in entertainment service, tried a bunch of different things, including like a restaurant, the typical things. But what he really wanted to do was work in a theater. And so through the local Rotary Club, as well as the technical college and his high school, they were able to develop a program where he could try these different things. And when he graduated from high school, he went on, found a job, and is gainfully employed. His family is delighted. And that was really one of the great success stories. Still doing it today. But that young man probably wouldn't have been able to do that without some help up front. Second story is way, way, way up north, very rural, more trees than lakes and people. And transportation matters. Two brothers lived up there with their parents. Their parents had a very tragic accident, killed. And so all of a sudden, sister is responsible for the two young adults in her life, has one child of her own. Her child gave up his bedroom for the two brothers. And what was interesting to me was how in a little community you could find people, once they knew there was a problem, that would create a mechanism where they could be integrated into a workplace as greeters and as helpers. They could find a way to help neighbors, and more importantly, neighbors could reach out to that family to make sure that they were taken care of. Kind of last setting involves a number of people in more urban settings, but this is kind of what we don't think about. A man 64 years old and kind of mid-state had a stroke. He had worked hard his whole life, still was working hard, thought, with the economy, he couldn't quite retire at 65, be more like 70, has a stroke. And he very eloquently told how if it were not for IRIS and the help up he got, that he would have lost his house, his wife couldn't have kept her job, and the family stayed intact to get him through this. And it also, again, through all these stories, it reaches out and tells you that when neighbors and real community leaders through volunteers or workplaces know that natural network is built up, which doesn't just happen. It takes people to make it happen, some of it organized, some otherwise. But when it does happen, what we've seen with the communities in the areas that have had IRIS the longest in self-direction is there is a very mature network there of reach out. And there's a synergism of better because you have this growing and developing and doing it. And that, I believe, is the beauty of what works with this. It's families like and individuals like Jessica and others who are able then to have the confidence to reach out even further, to reach their dreams and their goals, which really aren't all that different than ours. They just have a lot harder day to get there than some of us do. So when I look at this and you think of families and you really want it, there was an outcry here when there were changes being proposed in the budget that were proposed. And we all know integration is going to happen, but I serve on a behavioral health hospital board. And if you ask 10 people what integration is, you'll get 10 different answers. And we all know that, so that's why we appreciate you being here today. But what I do know matters for real people is that you need the natural supports to develop, but that takes some help up front to do it. And what we call IRIS consultants today are critical in terms of being the pathfinders, the pavers, to make that happen because it isn't always naturally known what's in a community. It's integration of family and your extended family in a good plan. That one thing, our dedication of resources at the front end to have a tight plan that helps identify where they go in probably the 45 different families I directly interfaced with made a difference. Without that, I don't think you would have been successful. So more intensive at the front end, person-centered, but what it does mean at the back end, you're going to have success stories that then help, and I want to leave this point with you because it really impressed me. It isn't too often in programs like this where you see families directly reaching out to other families. And there's a little paperwork at the front end of IRIS to be part of it. Families were great about being sort of those natural tutors to tell you how to do it and make it work. And again, part of that is making sure that you have this natural attenuation. When you get into issues like transportation and employment, they will work different in different parts of the state, be it Wisconsin or others. And it takes community involvement to do that. An employer is not going to hire somebody if someone doesn't say, hey, I've done this, we can do this, I know I'm out of time. One other thing I would end on, I think it's important that you use groups like the National Conference of State Legislators who are interested in these areas, NGA, to sort of reach out, because there are state legislators around the country that really have an interest in the how to do this the best way and how to integrate, and I would encourage you to do that. So the challenge is make sure that the Jessicas of the world have the tools they need, and the communities and her families have the tools to really make this workable. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. And the briefest speaker. We know that the lawyer will always speak the
Absolutely,
shortest
yeah.
amount
I'm
of
glad
time.
you gave me a good 20 minutes here.
All right.
Should be just about enough to get started, so.
The lawyers always have the most information. Mitchell.
So, yeah, I'm Mitch Hagopian. I'm an attorney with Disability Rights Wisconsin. We're the protection and advocacy agency for people with disabilities in Wisconsin. And I also serve on the IRIS Advisory Committee, which is the stakeholder group that actually meets and talks about how IRIS works, doesn't work, and how we can improve it. A little history about, and I'm supposed to talk about the IRIS program and the Family Care and IRIS Ombudsman program, the advocacy arm that applies to both Family Care and IRIS. So with respect to IRIS, I mean, a little history lesson on how this came about should be, hopefully will be instructive as to how we develop the next iteration of this thing. IRIS was developed with massive stakeholder input. Not a lot of people, but all the people who were involved in it knew about self-direction, had been involved with people who had self-directed, who understood all of the philosophical underpinnings of self-determination and self-advocacy. And those people met with like-minded bureaucrats in the Department of Health Services and developed a little tiny waiver program that eventually got called the IRIS program. This was developed as an alternative to the family care program because it was going to be impossible in Wisconsin to meet the choice of provider requirements of the Medicaid Act, because we would not be able to have more than one managed care organization in every single county in the state. And CMS, as a condition of expanding IRIS or expanding family care, required that the state have some competition to the available to people, that there be some other choice other than the managed care organization. And that's where IRIS came about. The idea was it would be a tiny little program, have about 250 people in it after the first year or so, maybe peak out at around 1,500 people total. Well, now we're 5 or 6 years into it. We got 12,000 people in it. It's wildly successful, and it's basically, I have to say this, been built as we have implemented it. It's been a work in progress from the beginning. And the IRIS Advisory Committee, which is what I serve on, I served on the committees that created it and then was appointed to the IRIS Advisory Committee after it became a functioning program. And throughout this entire process, the Department of Health Services has solicited and encouraged input from the consumers and the advocates that make up the IRIS Advisory Committee. It's really, in my mind, a model for stakeholder involvement, both at the front end and in the continuing, operation and development of the program. As an example, in the last, since we don't have the new system yet, and we're now coming up on our 5th year with IRIS, Wisconsin is now renewing the IRIS waiver. And last fall, they also did an amendment to the waiver, and it was the first chance the public ever had to comment on waivers under the new CMS protocols. And so what we and many other groups did was write detailed comments to the IRIS waiver to the amendment last year, knowing that these would not be adopted because they were just changing one thing in this particular amendment. But what we did then was, at the IRIS Advisory Committee meeting, was then encourage DHS, and they accepted this challenge, to take all the comments that had been submitted during that earlier process and then talk through them. We had a dialogue We talked with the people at DHS about this. We didn't just tell them and they listened. We talked with them. We talked through their concerns. We talked through our concerns over a period of 6 months until then, as they were developing the waiver renewal, which is now out for comment today. And I just finished looking over the first 150 pages of it or so. And I can tell you that the vast majority of the concerns that we raised and other advocacy organizations raised and other consumers raised in the context of that, those earlier discussions, they're incorporated into the new IRIS waiver. It really is a model for how these things should operate. And I'm just hoping and I'm praying that the Department of Health Services is going to learn from that experience, embrace all the expertise that is developed and is already here in Wisconsin and can help them make this work. We're not a state that's afraid of managed care. We invented it for managed long-term care, essentially. The new system is managed care. Whether you can take IRIS, as it has been developed over the past 7 years or so, and plunk it into a managed care model, I don't know if it can be done. If everybody was Merrill, maybe it could be. I'm not convinced they are, but I'm willing to be convinced, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be convinced. So, that's what I want to mainly talk about is the stakeholder input here. I do want to talk a little bit about the Family Care IRIS Ombudsman Program. This is another place where Wisconsin is, way ahead of the bar. The CMS proposed regulation now has a requirement that states have some sort of an ombudsman program, and it looks an awful lot like the one Wisconsin invented 7 or 8 years ago. The model here is that we have lay advocates, non-attorneys. We have 7.5 of them, plus an attorney and a program director. And they are available to every single person who is in family care or IRIS as an independent, unbiased, and trained advocate. Someone who understands the rules, the regulations, and the policies of both of those programs and the contract provisions, as Merrill pointed out, which are crucial to all this. And they can help people at every step of the way in terms of advocating for their rights within these programs. That was a crucial thing when we embraced family care 10, 15 years ago, that nobody was going to go to managed care without a strong, independent ombudsman available to represent people who might get in trouble in managed care, as we suspected they would. And the program has been very successful, and it is not an adversarial program. The ombudsman negotiate with MCOs, they negotiate with the IRIS program, they solve problems, and 90% of the disputes are settled long before there's a need to go to a state fair hearing or even a grievance or appeal. But the fact that they know how to do grievances, they know how to do appeals, is crucial to making sure that they can then convince people at earlier stages of these disputes that they should be talking to it. And so that is one of the most important things that we've learned from that, is that the ability to represent at every level of the administrative process is critical to making sure that the MCOs, the IRIS program, takes people seriously at the earlier stages, because it's in nobody's interest, especially not the consumers, to have to do these things in state fair hearings. I will say one thing about stakeholders. Stakeholders, they include insurance companies and managed care organizations and providers. But really, the only stakeholder that ultimately matters is the consumer, the person who's receiving these services. They're the stakeholder that matters. They're the ones who can explain what their experience is. And they're the ones who are ultimately affected by the programs that are developed. We want to make sure that, the state doesn't go bankrupt. We want to make sure that providers are able to pay their staffs adequately so you have good care. But ultimately, the stakeholder that matters is the one who's getting the service, who's getting the personal care services in their home. And that's the one who the state needs to be listening to when they develop this program.
Thank you. I wanted to ask the panel a question. I think so many of us are appreciative of what we've learned from Wisconsin and what others cite as the Wisconsin example with regards to the ombudsman program. I'm just kind of curious, as states begin to look at a further march into managed care, Do you, any of you know of any particular validation or any studies that show, are there differences between rejections for service between a strict Medicaid system and managed care systems? Because one of the stories, whether it's true or not, that we hear about managed care companies is the presumption that managed care and private insurance, MCOs, act on the basis of rejecting everything that comes their way, whereas when programs, Medicaid programs, are administered by the state, the rejection levels are less. Is there any truth in that? Or are there studies that show that that's not really accurate? Mariel, your face is turning red. I don't know if it's because...
No, that's probably just from my son.
Yeah. So that Texas sun.
So I think it's interesting. It doesn't
Use
make...
your mic.
Is that
She
better?
took- As directed.
Good grief. It's a good thing I love you as much as I do. It doesn't make sense for MCOs in these arrangements to deny all services, because the reality is it creates very significant acute episodes for people then. So the model, or the unmodel, really should be around ensuring that people have the services and supports they need, so that you don't have those disruptions. I mean, because acute medical, conditions create a whole host of issues, not just cost. I mean, there are a whole host of issues. People are out of work when that happens. Their families can get fragmented. They can lose their housing. I mean, that downstream roll from there is horrid.
Agreed,
So,
but are there any...
studies? HMA, Kaiser, and CHCS would be the three I would say off the top of my head that I can't.
They can validate that.
That could look at that. But it doesn't make sense to do that. Can I take the opportunity to answer one question that Lisa asked me to speak to that I completely didn't do while I was up here? And it goes in concert with that, but it's just to say that the service plan, we really haven't touched on the service plan and really how that's such an important piece of managed care, but really of self-direction as well in the person's life. And I think it's one of those things that when that discovery process begins, and it should be a discovery process, and hopefully we're moving the needle on that versus these checklist, deficit-based assessments that we've all gotten so unaccustomed to, if we can help it. But is really to be able to say, that's where you should be asked that day. Do you self-direct now, and do you want to self-direct? If you're not self-directing now, what can we do to help you do that? That's really where that process should be. That's where self-direction gets operationalized within, the managed care structure. And then it should also drive those very concerns that Jessica pointed out for sure, but that you were just talking about of those denials. Thank you.
Mitchell, did you have a response?
Of course, I have no statistics whatsoever, so there's no studies, nothing. But
Run you for office then.
But I can say that, anecdotally, I mean, we operate the Family Care Iris Ombudsman program, so we're the bad news recipients, right? So when people aren't happy, they do find their way to our program. And I will say that we do not see in the managed care organizations that are operating in Wisconsin right now this business of wholesale denials or automatic, no to any services. That's not happening in Wisconsin. But I attribute that partly to A, that we have a forceful ombudsman program keeping an eye on things. Two, all the MCOs always have competition. Some of them compete with each other because there's more than one MCO in a geographic area, but all of them are competing with IRIS. They're all competing with a completely different model. They have to have a superior product in order to maintain their, market share. That's it. I mean, 12,000 people out of the 50 or 55,000 that are in long-term care in Wisconsin don't want managed care. There's a reason for that. It may be they just love to self-direct, but it may be some of them may not be happy with managed care as it exists in Wisconsin. One of our concerns is that those are all going to be lumped into one organization, and that competition is not going to be there anymore, and that could lead to a diminution in the quality.
Councilmember Neiman, Ari?
Yeah, my question is in relation to a topic that's been on the mind of a lot of folks who monitor self-direction lately. As you're all probably familiar, we recently saw a judicial ruling on the question of the Department of Labor's companionship exemption rule requiring overtime requirements to be imposed in the home and community-based services area. And I know many states have struggled with the question of how to finance overtime requirements and whether or not their state programs will be considered a joint employer under the rule, or whether or not particular sub-state entities like counties or agencies or even MCOs might be considered a joint employer under the rule. I'm hoping you can speak a little bit to how Wisconsin anticipates dealing with some of the impacts of this new overtime requirement, and whether or not you anticipate the state will, or a sub-state entity will, serve as a joint employer under the new Department of Labor rule.
Well, we've started to struggle with that in the IRIS program already. I can say that in IRIS, the state has taken the position they're not a joint employer. They don't want to be.
Shocking.
Isn't it? It is, isn't it? Yes. And there are, actual pieces of the IRIS program, how it is operationalized, that, tend in the favor of finding them not to be that joint employer. One is that the participant really does have the right to hire and fire their workers and their providers. They have absolute right over that. I mean, occasionally one is going to get knocked off because they violate some rule, and even though the person would like to keep them, they can't. But basically, it's hiring and firing is completely within the authority of the participant, and also within a reasonable degree of range. They can set the wages for those people too. They're not restricted to minimum wage or some other arbitrary number. It's not unlimited, although you can through using appeal mechanisms actually get higher rates than even the ranges would allow. So those are two things that are quite important to making sure that the state doesn't find itself in the position it doesn't want to be in. But those are also things that make IRIS a better program for the people who participate in it.
If any of you would like to ask questions in the audience, come on up to the conferee table or raise your hand and sit in front of a mic, or go ahead, ma'am. You're first.
I could go on with the IRS things, but now I wanted to ask you, and I don't want to totally put you on this kind of part of the answer right now, but I'm a person that has had chronic illness since I was juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So I know about acute care very well. In the last 3 years, if you saw my medical bills over the last year, do you know what you're getting yourself into? Second of all, I'm trying to picture how this can work, without a lot of bureaucracy, and frankly, I don't need any more stress than I already had in my life. And I know one thing, okay, I'm Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare because I have a good work history. Medicaid, because I have straight Medicaid now when I go to provider.
So Michelle, to answer the first question you asked, like, do you know what you're getting into? Being that you're sitting next to Lee, I'm not even sure how to answer that question. But great. So we'll pass on that and save time. I think that the whole network adequacy question is huge. I think there are two points that I'll try to respond to, in terms of just the time allotment here, and I'm always happy to talk with you offline. But one is just the network, and then two is do things just get more difficult for people to have to navigate the bureaucracy of the insurer, if you will, and then also the state, as well. The goal is to streamline that. Does that work initially? Probably not. Standing up a health plan, you guys already know this here, it's beastly and it's complicated. And it's a bunch of humanoids that are doing it with other humanoids, so it's bound, to have bumps in the road. But the goal is to make things more streamlined, so that if you're having trouble, getting your shoes authorized, that there should be a bank of people, an office of people that can actually help make that happen, so that you don't have to stress about it all the time. But you do pick those shoes you want, pick the person that you want creating the shoes and the design, everything. And so, I think that's the thing. And so if we can build that support, through the managed care and help take all the muckiness of that bureaucracy away, that would be very helpful. So that would be the goal of it. How quickly it gets there really depends on the design of the program. And I just think, I think I said it 4 times before, I'll say it again. That's why you guys need to be involved in informing that. We should. We do. We should do more, but we do. And and I think you're right. I don't think there's a comparison of any individual at all, when they hit barriers or challenges, or, any, chronicity or acute episode. You're right. Nobody should really be compared by that, but you're right.
We have just a couple of minutes left, so we can take one question from the phone. Is there anyone on the phone who'd like to ask a question? There's not. Anyone else in the audience? Thank you, panel. We'll transition to our next panel now. Thank you very much. Patrick, Doug, Mary Beth, and Mark, can you come on down or up or over?
All right.
Ari's panel.
Yes, indeed.
Ari's up.
Is mine on or off?
Okay. Which email address is that? Could you give me a copy of these? Thank you. Which day? Yeah, let's touch base. Text me. Okay. So, our next panel relates to the topic of integrated employment under Medicaid managed care, and it's my pleasure to ask our first panelist, Patrick Young, who is a self-advocate here in Wisconsin, to speak to his experiences and opinions on the topic of integrated employment. Patrick?
Of course.
Push it again.
There it is.
Of course. Of course. So everyone has a right to live in the community. See, right now I am living my dream. I have my own apartment with a roommate. His name is Adam. room, and I have a shop in the community, and support myself. I sometimes go to the fitness center to go to shows and to see movies with my friends in the community. So how I conducted with my shop. It starts with a short mission trip for a week. To also to do community service by rebuilding houses people who could not do it themselves. So from that, I'm not the owner of the company who was impressed with my work. From that, I got my job. I filled out a application like everyone, and also have a job interview with the CEO of the. I interview with the managers and the CEO of the company. They offered me a job. I got working there when I was 16 years old. That means in high school. I have worked there over 10 years. A little bit about my job. I move on in the company. I got finishing assistant at Taylor Labor Products is located in Miami Falls. I work on the production floor, and I move on to with other shops. I have the record in the company for making the most bucks is 3 hours. It's 800 bucks in 3 hours.
Oh,
Hours. And
impressive.
yes, my work has been organized a couple of times every year to be a good company. What I get support to live in the community. I got support services through my service from it's got Kill Wisconsin. Wisconsin is my regional MCO. They help me with grocery shopping, cooking, and transportation. I use self-direct services. That means you can choose your services where you live. It supports me with my shop, working, and with my work schedule, and helping me with transportation. I have to work to live in community on my own. I use the money skill to support me both work and independent living. One of the big obstacles we all have is transportation. This is the way to do that is teamwork. It's the best way to get good results. Through my money skill, through money skill supports me so I can be a full member of the community. So what I can do with the shop in my apartment. I have an apartment. Apartment with a roommate. His name is Adam. In our apartment, we have 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. You see at the slides. I live on my own with the services to support for grocery shopping, cooking skills, and I work. I work 4 days a week, and pay all my bills. I pay all my bills myself. I pay taxes to give back to my community through investment. This is a quote from Abraham Lincoln. The best way to protect your future is to create. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Patrick. I was really struck by your story about how you got your job, because the importance of building those kinds of community connections and really natural relationships is so critical to this topic. Patrick was exactly 7 minutes, and so I think he sets the bar.
Thank you.
For all of our other panelists. And so I would, of course, ask you to imitate Patrick's example and not exceed that 7-minute mark. Our next panelist is Doug Hunt of Dane County Employment Supports.
Thank you. Thanks, Patrick. You serve as a great example of what we're all about. And I work with the Dane County Department of Human Services, and I'm a program specialist in the area of employment supports for adults with developmental disabilities. Dane County provides services to individuals with disabilities under a 1915C Home and Community-Based Services Medicaid waiver called the Community Integration Programs. We're not yet in family care. We use a self-directed services model of service delivery, and we have for over 15 years. We emphasize choice, individualized budgets, person-centered planning, and fiscal responsibility. My comments today reflect our experience with employment-related policies that have been effective in Dane County under the KIP waiver. As we're slated to join family care in the near future, we hope that similar employment policies will be included in the design of Wisconsin's managed care system. A few facts about employment services for individuals here in Dane County, and again, I'm speaking regarding adults with developmental disabilities. We serve just over 1,100 adults in employment or day services, primarily employment. Our community integrated employment rate is about 72%, and this compares to less than 10% in family care and IRIS, according to 2014 data. Supported employees work for over 800 different Dane County businesses and public sector employers, and the approximate gross wages earned by supported employees in Dane County is roughly $3.9 million a year, most of which gets spent right here in Dane. So I'm going to talk briefly about 5 priorities that have helped us achieve a high rate of integrated employment. And the first is that for many years, 30 years, we have prioritized community integrated work as the first and preferred option for individuals, regardless of the severity of their disability. As we've heard today, integrated employment offers individuals with disabilities the best opportunity to meaningfully participate in and contribute to their communities. It gives individuals greater financial self-reliance, crucial to independent living in the community. Therefore, while we respect informed choice, we believe it's good public policy to prioritize and encourage services that create and sustain integrated community work. It's also critical that in the midst of those services, we ensure that personal care services are available in work and community settings, because often that provision of personal care is a major barrier to employment for individuals with physical disabilities. So prioritize integrated work. Second, institute policies that promote community employment for all transition age youth, and actively partner with stakeholders to achieve this goal. So we for many years have partnered closely with Dane County High Schools and our Division of Vocational Rehabilitation to ensure that the jobs that individuals find in high school are sustained by the long-term support system. And as a result, every year, 85 to 95% of youth in Dane County exit school with an average of 14 to 18 hours a week of community-based work. And importantly, this policy responds to the dreams and goals that most parents have for their young adults, children with disabilities. And by funding support for employment at transition, families are better able to sustain their caregiving role until their adult children have the means to live more independently. To ensure that the jobs that are created are sustainable, we've invest a lot in transition technical assistance to both school staff and adult vocational providers. We provide mentoring in job development and job coaching, making sure that job matches are ones that can be sustainable and are cost-effective to support. The third area, we want to ensure that we invest in our provider network. We want to ensure that providers are using best practice employment services and ensure that payment rates are fair and as much as possible tied to quality employment outcomes. So we've invested, again, considerable resources in this area: customized employment, job development, systematic instruction. All of these are important techniques and tools that we need to continue to emphasize with our providers, and we need to reward providers for work that's well done. The fourth area, I think that has helped us achieve these high rates of employment is we strive to continue to innovate new models of cost-effective employment supports. So because we serve a wide continuum of job seekers with a wide array of employment needs, we need a wide array of employment options. And we've been fortunate to help implement the first project search program in the state. We have a robust self-employment effort that sees many individuals in self-employment, from aluminum recycling to arts enterprises. And we've innovated some new, actually copied Oklahoma's effective program, which we call Partners with Business, which enables employers to provide support when traditional job coaching by a vocational agency isn't a good fit. And then the last area that we emphasize as a priority is we want to operate under the assumption that federal legislation that prioritizes community settings and integrated work is what we're going to continue to deal with in the future. So we want to pay close attention to the CMS Service Settings Rule, and we want to leverage the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA, to help us reach the high rates of employment and maintain those high rates of employment. So in summary, based on Dane County's experience, if we are able to encourage Wisconsin's Department of Health Services and the managed care system to adopt similar policy priorities, we think that Wisconsin will make steady progress in raising the percentage of individuals working in the community. Without such policies, the progress may be in doubt, and perhaps we risk undoing the good work that has been done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and once again, on time. Our next speaker is Mary Beth Popchak of Lakeside Curative in Racine County.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today. It's a pleasure to reconnect with some of you and to see some new faces and to talk about a topic that is very, very important to me. The speakers that have gone before me have done an excellent job of presenting. So please bear with me as I need to refer to my notes because I'm not quite as comfortable talking with a group of people. So I do apologize. What I would like to focus on is Wisconsin's long-term focus on integrated employment for individuals with disabilities and the exceptional outcomes related to that focus. This is something that we can all celebrate within this room. I think we've made a lot of progress, and the focus has been there for a number of years, and I would like to see it continue into the future with as much passion as we have seen in the past. But it's also something that we need to preserve and ensure as we consider any changes to, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use family care, managed care. We need to make sure that integrated employment continues to be the key driver and a core service or benefit related to any changes to managed care. The world is changing at a rapid pace, and the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act will help capitalize on the need for Wisconsin and other states to maintain its focus on community employment. The Act focuses on career services for young adults and moves away from sequencing of services that has traditionally existed. Plus, it emphasizes real-world training opportunities, what we've heard earlier. The Act also sets higher expectations for youth with disabilities regarding community competitive employment and having individuals with disabilities being paid at least a minimum wage. In summary, this Act lays the ground and work for a future predicated on not settling for outdated service models. Instead, it lays the groundwork and a pathway for community employment paid at least minimum wage as the best desired outcome for all individuals with disabilities, most importantly, starting at a very young age. So how can we make sure this happens? As the Executive Director of a Community Rehabilitation Program, or CRP, I can tell you firsthand that change in focus from traditional adult services to community employment is possible. All it takes is strong leadership, determination, and anyone that knows me, some stubbornness, and a sincere commitment to community employment, again, paid at least minimum wage. There's no need for drama, certainly no need to hang on to the past, and no need for anything but a sincere willingness to alter the course for the right reasons and move ahead. I would suggest that CRP providers who are hesitant to make integrated employment a priority convert that energy that they are using to fight the change and convert that energy instead into encouraging positive, forward-thinking change within their organizations. And more importantly, through that change, have a positive impact on persons served, which is the ultimate bottom line. In order to do this, we must work hard to ensure that Wisconsin's focus on integrated employment, paid at least minimum wage, is solid and not allowed to diminish back to old practices under any future changes to managed care. We need to keep moving forward. People are counting on it moving forward. Every day, LCS has the opportunity to impact hundreds of people's lives. As an organization, we have made the commitment to look to community employment as the cornerstone of our service. We just completed strategic planning, and it is the number one item on our agenda for the future. Many of the people we support already work at least part-time in the community. Some are in the process of obtaining that ideal job, and others are exploring their career options for the first time. The common thread is that overwhelmingly, the majority of these people want to work in the community, and every single one of them is working hard to make that happen. Critical to this is making people aware of the array of career choices available to them. Many people, sadly, I've worked with, are not aware of the choices that are out there. Once aware, they're ready to go for it, and they're ready for that employment, and it's fantastic. So our current primary care or managed care partner is Community Care, and they understand that community employment and community engagement, along with medical stability, leads to a healthy life. Community Care has allowed us to develop new pre-vocational options for individuals who have not worked previously. By Community Care allowing service innovation, I think you talked a little bit about that, Doug, we have been able to erode the myth that people with disabilities overwhelmingly want or choose to stay in facility-based work. Again, we're moving forward. Again, and forgive me for repeating myself, Wisconsin needs to maintain its commitment to providing funding and adequate support for all individuals with disabilities so they can attain and maintain jobs in the community paid at least minimum wage. And it is imperative for any changes to managed care to continue to include this focus on community employment. When individuals with disabilities are employed in the community and paid at least minimum wage, we're learning that it saves the state approximately $12,000 every year per one person who in the past was enrolled in pre-vocational services. When you multiply that out across hundreds and thousands of people, there is definitely the ability to save some money and maintain a focus on integrated employment. Additionally, and as Patrick mentioned, when people are employed in the community, they have more expendable income to spend in their communities. We saw pictures of that. To support local businesses, and they're able to contribute more toward local and state taxes. Patrick's life is an excellent example of what many of the people that I work with want and should have available to them, that being a full and inclusive life. Isn't that what we all want? In thinking about Patrick's presentation, it causes me to stop and ask you to think about how we all got here today. I'm sure there were a variety of ways: walking, wheeling, car, bus, train, taxi, Uber, or even maybe via plane. Inherent in any future plans for supporting individuals to lead inclusive lives and work in the community is the need to recognize that transportation needs to be adequately funded and available to all of those who live in the city as well as rural areas. Any changes to family care need to carefully consider this factor. Adequate transportation is a necessity. As Wisconsin moves forward and considers changes to family care, managed care, I ask that those individuals responsible for any changes seriously contemplate the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and its core elements. I ask that you please earnestly consider how Wisconsin can include a similarly strong focus on community employment within its managed care model. I ask that decision makers insist on service innovation that centers on inclusion, community engagement, and not on isolation and segregation. Community employment paid at least sub-minimum wage is critical for our state citizens with disabilities, not only as a civil rights issue, but also as a human right. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next and final speaker is Mark Hilliker, CEO of Community Care of Central Wisconsin. Mark?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. Actually, our organization has grown again, and we, as a result, changed our name. So we're now Community Care Connections of Wisconsin because our service area has expanded beyond the central part of the state. I'd like to talk just a little bit about our organization. We were one of the 5 family care pilot counties that started the family care program back in 2000. And that was Portage County, La Crosse County, Richland, Fond du Lac, and Milwaukee. And we piloted that program in Portage County for 8 years before family care was slated to expand more regionally. And through that regional expansion, we actually grew to 3 counties in size and then to 5, and now we currently serve 16 counties in central and northwest Wisconsin. In my 7 minutes, I guess I have to overcome the myth that MCOs and managed care is scary, so I'll try to do my best at that, as well as talk a little bit about our approach to integrated employment and some of the innovation that's taken place over the last 8 years or so. To date, currently we serve about 5,700 members across the 16-county region that we provide support in. And that's a significantly larger geographic area than I think we ever anticipated when this family care expansion started. It's also been a great learning experience from both a cultural, a geographic, and a program delivery standpoint as we look at providing support to people who live in some might say some suburban areas and more rural areas of the state and some of the challenges that come along with that. And certainly as it relates to integrated employment. What I'd like to talk about today is our focus and philosophy as an organization, and I think the Family Cares programs focus on person-centered planning and person-centered care and support. And I think, for us, that really meant engaging people and understanding their capabilities and their gifts and the talents that they bring to the communities that they live in, and the value that every single person has in the lives of others. And we really took that to heart and thought about how can we create a model of managed care delivery that reflects that. And so what we've done over the last 8 years is create a model of managed care that we call Common Unity. And it's a model that really focuses on citizenship as its core and helping people live full lives, meaningful lives as full citizens within their communities. And we think there are really 5 key component pieces to that. One is community connections and making sure that people are connected to their communities in meaningful ways. Self-determination and self-direction is the second. So making sure that people are making decisions that are important in their own lives. Living in the community. It's having your own front door, living in your own apartment, your own home, whatever it might be, but having that ability to live within the community that you're in. integrated employment. We'll talk a little bit more about that right now. But going beyond asking people, do you want to work, to asking people, where do you want to work, and talking about what does it mean to have a job and to be employed in something that's meaningful in your life. And lastly, mobility. So it's not good enough just to be able to get from point A to point B, but how do you access those places that you need to get to, you want to get to, that you really want to be a part of? So those are sort of the key components of the model that we've created. And those are the things that really drive the work we do on a day-to-day basis. As we started to look at how we were supporting integrated employment services for people within our service region, it became clear to us pretty early on that we were looking at a service-based delivery system in an area where we were very interested in looking at outcomes and helping people achieve those things that are most important in their lives. So we started to think a little bit about how do we provide employment support that really mimics that, and it becomes more of an outcome-based approach rather than a service provision. So in more traditional models of supported employment, we're paying our providers for the hours of job coaching that they were providing to our members. And there was really no incentive for providers to fade that support over time because it was a disincentive to them from a monetary standpoint. We also saw some inconsistencies in expectations that were created for providers. Differences in supervision and staff adequacy, documentation standards, communication with us as the managed care organization, training for provider staff, the use of technology. Those types of things were all things that were pointed out to us as being sort of key areas of focus. So what we've done is created an outcome-based payment model for integrated and supported employment. And it's really a model that kind of turns our thinking on its head. It's a model that pays providers for the hours a member works rather than the hours of job coaching provided. And those hours of work also, that compensation includes any benefits that employee would receive as well. It's a model that supports community and citizenship. It's a model that grew out of a partnership with our providers. We work directly with our employment providers to come up with this model, to pilot it, and then ultimately to implement it. And to pilot it, we ran this model with our support employment providers in the central part of our region for 6 months. And we modeled what the payments would be in the current model and what it would be in the new model. And so they were able to see kind of side by side what that looked like. And I think that was a really great experience to sort of demonstrate that this could be done in a way that wasn't going to be fiscally damaging. In fact, it's a real incentive for providers to think about integrated employment in different ways. So I mentioned incentivizing providers. This model, we think, really increases providers' net revenue if members' hours worked increase without increasing the support percentage needed for the provider. So as the member works more hours and there's not a need for additional support by the provider, there's an incentive there because they're getting paid for those hours worked. We can increase provider net revenue if the member maintains hours worked but is able to do so with lower support. Encourage providers to assist members to avoid reduction in hours wherever that's possible. So there's an active partnership that goes on. We've also facilitated the use of best practices as well. So technology, the use of natural supports and systematic instruction to really help avoid the need for job coaching whenever it's possible. So trying to create that independence that's necessary to really grow within that job.
1 minute.
Thank you. And it encouraged providers to assist members to find jobs with paid time off and other benefits. So there are 4 tiers in this model, and they're all acuity-based. And there are also 3 levels of employment, so time frames, from 0 to 11 months, 12 to 24 months, and 25-plus months. We pay based on those levels of acuity and time periods within the model. I'm not going to go into any detail on that today because I don't have time. But I would tell you that we've been able to see some great movement here by our providers and really looking at creating better matches for members who are looking for jobs, creating longer longevity for members who are working in the community, supporting better outcomes for that member in terms of growing skills and abilities and interest that comes along with that. And in the end, I think there's been an agreement between us and our providers that this is a model that's sustainable over time, and has actually been looked at as a potential model for providers outside of Wisconsin. So we're really excited about the opportunities that this presents, not only in Wisconsin, but beyond.
And right on time. So we have about 15 minutes for Q&A, and I want to exercise moderator's prerogative and just start off with a question of my own. Patrick, at the beginning of this discussion, talked about how he found his job because you were in a volunteer experience and you connected with somebody there that ended up connecting you with your eventual job. And, you know, in our experience, that's often how people find employment. And one of the ways, I don't know if this was the way that you got connected with that volunteer experience, but one of the ways in which folks get connected with volunteer activities is the availability of integrated day services and moving away from the old facility-based rehabilitation model. So my question to all of you here is, what can we do to promote more of those opportunities with integrated day services and integrated volunteer activities? And how does that relate to the broader topic of getting people in integrated employment?
I would probably say for us in that question, natural supports. Both. So go to the community, and looking what opportunities and opportunities are out there for other types of involvement. It is how I connected to myself for that national connection and support from. That's where I come from.
That makes a great deal of sense. Do other panelists have thoughts as well?
I'll just jump in and say that I think the connecting piece is probably the most critical piece in all of this. And what we've discovered through our care management, care planning processes is that if we are able to spend that time up front with members really trying to understand where their interests are and where their real passions lie, we're able to start then to create some of those connections within the community that are really meaningful in their lives. And those oftentimes lead to other connections that lead to employment. So there's a great starting place with connections. The other piece of it is in the job development process is really doing some similar things and trying to understand best where people's interests and skills lie, and really trying to connect those with employers that have opportunities for them to work in an environment that matches those things.
I think along with that, taking the time as an organization to make a pure commitment to that community connection piece across the organization and dispelling some of the myths that persist with what a day service should look like, and changing that perception to say that it needs to include quality community involvement and not accepting anything less is critical. There's a lot of things that persist out there from the education system to the parents, through staff, through the community. So I think it starts at the very, very basic essence of just breaking down that stereotypical perception of what a day service is and showing what it should be and converting it into that community focus is critical. It takes a commitment.
And I would just add to that, start early.
Yeah.
So you set your expectations, and but at the point that young children and young adults are growing up in the school system, that they're going to be working in integrated jobs, and their parents will often lead the charge in that way and will be actively seeking those kind of connections that will ultimately lead to paid work. But we've got to talk about it early and often and never let up.
I think that's very powerful. My council colleague, Clyde Terry, has a question.
Okay. Thank you, Ari. My question goes to the regulations proposed by CMS regarding Medicaid managed care. Particularly for those of you who are in the business, are you comfortable with those regulations, that they adequately include employment as a requirement for any Medicaid managed care plan going forward? And if not, what kind of language would you tell us that we need to suggest to CMS to accomplish the end that you envision?
Mark, you want to try that?
Sure.
Put you on the spot.
I think that having employment services and supports within any benefit package that moves forward is absolutely essential. And so whatever we can do here in Wisconsin to help support that, I think is something that we're going to want to do. I certainly think that we've made some great strides in terms of having more integrated employment opportunities available to those people that are supported within these publicly funded programs. But there's a lot of work that we need to do yet. And I think Doug illustrated that with his statistics early on in this conversation. So there's a lot of room for us to improve. And I think that there are many of us that really look at that as an opportunity that we want to make sure that we take a hold of.
And I would just add that I think it's very important for the Wisconsin Department of Health Services to take a clear stand that integrated employment is a policy priority. Back in 2008, the Managed Care Task Force on Employment set that recommendation, and I don't believe today it's yet been adopted. So if the state takes a leadership role in setting the tone, I believe that the managed care organizations with whom they contract and the IHAs will follow suit.
Thank you. So we're going to go to our audience for additional questions. And I just would like to remind the folks on the phone that if you have a question, you should email ncdforums@gmail.com. Let's start by taking questions from our audience in the room. Do we have any questions on the topic of integrated employment? Come up to the microphone.
Thank you. Although we've heard some great speakers talk about some success that's occurred in family care, overall, we've also heard about how family care and IRAs have not been very successful in terms of making integrated employment a priority. And since we now have the opportunity, we're going to be moving to a different managed care model and one that includes different, potentially different providers, has an integrated model. I just wondered nationally, are there other states that have been successful in having this kind of new model that we're going to have with potentially insurance companies and integrated care that has made it a priority to have integrated employment as part of the benefit package? Am I seeing a zero?
And was that question directed towards our panelists, to the council members? Or
Well, I guess in part to the council members, because I think we've heard some great speakers from Wisconsin, but I'm looking at those of you who have the national perspective. Since we're in, I guess, a design phase here in Wisconsin, are there other success stories that we can learn from?
Clyde?
Sure. Thank you for the questions. That's exactly why I asked the question I did, because asking the panelists, are they comfortable with the current CMS regulations as states create their model going forward? And what I heard is they weren't sure about the feds, but they want to make sure the mandate exists here in Wisconsin. We have heard, as we've gone around the country with these forums, employment is important. And while there is language in the regulations, it gets a little mushy when it comes to exactly how the Medicaid managed care, where the Medicaid managed care services should be performed. It talks about in the home, which certainly helps community-based services, and it talks about facilities as well. So I think a strong statement that we want to make sure employment is part of the requirement is really important. That's kind of why I asked the question. And as I said, we've heard from other states, but I think the stronger the message, the better.
And I would just add, you think all these smart business types. You'd think all these smart business types would like to see some data before they jump in bed with states and these insurance companies to provide services in the new era with managed care, you think they'd want to see some data? You think they'd ask to see the data? You think they'd have the data? Keep thinking. It ain't out there.
The only thing I would add there is, so there are a number of really high-quality systems that states are using to track data. They're not specific to managed care. Some states are utilizing them in fee-for-service arrangements. Where states have adopted employment as an outcome that they're holding managed care organizations accountable for, and that has happened in a number of areas. Some of the places where we still see inadequacies, and part of the reason why we're not comfortable endorsing a particular state's model, is you still don't see the investment in connecting with VR and connecting with the school system. And often the question of how we're calculating employment is really still under dispute. Are you going to count an enclave or a group-supported employment setting? Are you going to count someone towards a goal if they're only working 5 hours a week? Those are some of the policy questions that exist both within and beyond managed care, and they remain very much open issues in the managed care discussion.
One of my personal favorites is always having these insurance companies come in and start explaining to you person-centered planning, a concept they may have learned about maybe 2 weeks prior.
Do our panelists want to add anything on this, or should we try and take another question from the audience?
Not that I have it.
Well, thank you. It sounds like we're on the bleeding edge in this area, as we heard referenced earlier.
And we've got another questioner.
This is for Mark Hilliker. This morning, Ari, when you were going through your overview of key things that states should try to address in moving to managed care, you mentioned outcome measures. You mentioned guaranteeing that supported employment is available. You mentioned even the possibility of having rates tied to outcomes. And you talked about accountability in terms of the state's relationship with managed care organizations. I'm curious, Mark, in terms of your MCO, the things that you described, it seems like a lot of them are things that you guys undertook as your own initiative, as opposed to the state said you had to, or the state paid you extra to do it, or whatever. But if you could imagine a situation like Ari was describing, where the state of Wisconsin would be creating incentives for MCOs to do the kinds of things that you guys did voluntarily, what could you imagine would be in the contract or would be in the capitated rate structure that would create motivation, I guess, for some of the other MCOs, or maybe for some new players now who are going to be IHAs, for them to do some of the things that you guys decided you wanted to do because it was the right thing?
Well, I think probably key amongst those things is key performance metrics. So what are the expectations going forward? That, along with some clearly described incentives for meeting certain benchmarks, certainly would be helpful. I think there is a lot of good work that takes place with the managed care organizations in the state, and a lot of innovation that's taken place over the last 15 years in family care. And I think each of the organizations that's providing support in the state would really benefit from some clear direction from the state on a policy level, as it relates not only to employment, but to a number of other critical areas of community life. And so I think the more explicit we could be with that type of language within our contracts, the better it might be for all of us in terms of really being able to perform on those things. Some of the key challenges that we face, especially in the employment arena, is that we have a lot of development work to do with providers that have traditionally provided more of a sheltered workshop or enclave type of employment opportunities, and trying to help them think about what the future looks like, and having an impetus to move towards a model that more fully recognizes and integrated and supported employment as a priority is clearly one of the places where we struggle. And trying to look at how we can help those providers through technical assistance, ongoing education, those types of things. That's a really time-consuming process. But we've seen some providers who have made some significant transformation, especially in the last few years as it relates to moving in that direction.
So that transformation, do you feel like that's, in your region, you feel like it's the MCO's responsibility, or could you imagine a way that the state could actually be more of a force in helping you do that? Get providers to transform?
Well, I think it's probably both. Certainly, having some guidance from the state would be helpful, but I think it's, incumbent upon us to help to try to move the model forward too in innovative ways.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I think we have time for one final question. Anyone? Oh, Clyde. Excellent.
Thank you again. When I was moderating earlier, Ari was getting the last word, so I guess it's my turn.
Please, feel free.
Really quickly, and this really is an issue around workforce and making sure that we have the adequate support structure or staff to be able to provide the direct assistance that we're talking about here in the employment rating setting. I probably should have asked maybe even in the personal care setting earlier. Are you folks having any issues in recruiting employees to be able to do the work you're trying to do? And is there anything that we should be thinking about to sort of making sure that in order to be successful in what we're doing, that we should be examining that issue as well?
Recruiting is always a challenge. What we do is very rewarding and wonderful work, and enjoy every minute of it when it's a good fit. When it's not a good fit, you need to learn to cut the cord quicker, in my opinion, is what I've learned. But eventually you're going to get the right people who are really impactful, and providing the right training and the right connections to training is critical early on when you're bringing on new staff, to make sure that you have the right people who can really get the right outcomes that we're all working toward, that being someone being employed in a job that they enjoy and that's going to take them to the next step in their future. So again, it's that investment piece. But yeah, it's not easy. It isn't something that's the best fit for everyone, and we're learning that it isn't necessarily a set of characteristics. Someone may have a history of working in the field, they may have a sales history, they may have a combination of a history, or it may just be something that they feel passionate about, and sometimes those folks are the best fit for the job. So it's tricky. But it can work. You just need to keep trying and not hang on too long.
Anyone else want to speak to the recruitment issue?
Just that the provider reimbursement rates need to be adequate to pay a decent wage to the workers, and that they need to be encouraged to invest in competence so that workers go to their jobs with the skills to minimize paid supports, maximize natural supports, build on the community connections that are there.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists. You've been absolutely fantastic. And again, let's hear it for the panel.
We will take a 7-minute break and convene promptly back at 3:10 with our panel number 5. And if panel number 5 would just come up at that point. Thank you.